Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal. Here we explore how leaders in MedTech navigate uncertainty, make better risk based decisions, and build safe and effective products to support sustainable growth. Guys, today I'm super excited to welcome all of you to a very special session. I just came back from a wonderful conference in Boston, IMSC26 MedTech Safety, and we have a panel today. People who I met and I have known them for a long time. We have a panel today to talk about what we learned in this conference. So I'm so excited to welcome four of my distinguished guests. Bijan Elahi, he's a globally recognized risk management expert and educator, and he was the chair and organizer of the conference. We have Dr. Olaf Hedrick. He's the chief medical safety officer at Medtronic. And we have Michelle Lott, regulatory strategist, principal and founder at Lean RAQA. And we have Aaron Joseph. He's principal consultant at Sunstone Pilot and an expert in design control and risk management. As I welcome all of you guys, there's going to be a conversation. So please share your thoughts, questions, comments. If you were at the conference, make sure you are sharing your experiences in the chat. And if not, you can ask a question. These are experts and they have a lot of knowledge and expertise. Ask a question and I'll bring that into our conversation as much as possible. So let's start getting into that. Bijan, I'm going to start by asking you to share as the chair. You created this conference. As a chair, give us your key highlights from this particular conference.
Hi, Naveen. Thanks for hosting us and bringing this group together. It's nice to reflect back on the conference. This conference is kind of a work of love and passion to put together. It is a lot of work, but I'm also super pleased and energized by the reception and the appreciation that the community gives. This year was probably the best and biggest so far. Not probably, for sure it was. And we hosted it in Boston at the campus of Northeastern University. It was a beautiful facility, comfortable, and very well suited for our conference. We had over 400 people from 37 countries that had registered to participate, and we had the privilege of having the director of FDA CDRH give our opening keynote speech. And we had so many experts, including the ones online today, Olaf, Aaron, and Michelle, and yourself, actually, who shared their knowledge. And they taught classes like you did yourself. They gave lectures. They participated in discussions. It was just an incredible experience, very energizing.
Thank you, Bijan, for taking the lead on this. I'm going to still ask you to share a little bit more about why you started this conference and what is your vision moving forward.
Yeah. So the conference was started about 3 years ago. I've been in the field of safety risk management for more than 30 years. And I participated in a lot of conferences around the world about safety, system safety. And I found that there was no conference that was focused on medical technology. There were conferences about safety in many other areas, such as aerospace, defense, automotive, chemical, nuclear, all kinds of industries, but none about MedTech. And as I tried really hard to create a track in one of them for MedTech safety, in fact, I gave several lectures myself over the years, but I could only get one other person ever to show up from MedTech to speak. So I thought, well, this is not giving us enough attention. And I talked to some friends who were interested in MedTech safety. And I said, how about if we get together? And at the time I was working at Medtronic, I asked for the use of the Medtronic headquarters. They have a nice auditorium there. And I thought maybe we'll have about 50 people get together. And I was blown away that about 160 people showed up, about half from Europe. And I thought, wow, this really is something that has met a need. And so out of gratitude to those people that traveled all the way from Europe to Minneapolis for the first conference, we took the conference to Amsterdam last year in 2025. And then this year we came back to America in 2026. And again, in fairness, and also to increase the reach to worldwide, we are going to go back to Europe. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll go to Asia too. So this is just a conference that's held by volunteers. It's made by the community for the community. I think that's one of the reasons for its success, because it's really just ours and we make it whatever we want it to be. I'm just a leader for it. I facilitate what the community needs. So regarding my vision for it, you asked, I envision this conference will be an influencer on the world scale, both in Europe and North America, on the regulatory directions that are taken. I think we will influence both the MDR and US FDA, as well as others such as Health Canada, because these people who come to these meetings are the major players and drivers of action on the world scale. As an example, you remember Fu Min Wu, who was there in Amsterdam. He initiated this action on risk management maturity model. I thought it was a great idea. So I encouraged him to continue it. And he did. This year, he reported out and he brought together many co-chairs and leaders of that. In fact, Dr. Olaf Hedrick online here, he's one of those co-chairs and leaders of this, as well as many others from other companies. So I think they are together going to create a standard of measurement of goodness of safety risk management processes. Mm-hmm. This will help both companies and regulators, because now we will be able to know how good is our process. Yeah. And regulators will be able to more easily judge us as manufacturers. So this is an example of the fruits of this gathering. We're bringing together the experts, we are bringing together the users, we are identifying the needs, and collectively we're producing solutions.
Yeah, great. Bijan, I can tell you definitely the energy that I felt in Boston this time was amazing. I was at Amsterdam also last year, and every year the energy keeps going to the next level. So first of all, big thanks to you for taking this initiative and leadership. Olaf, I'm going to start with you because the conference theme this year was proactive safety from clinic to the home. And I think you're in the best position to give us that perspective. You are a physician, you are practicing, and now you are in the industry. You have seen the real world application of medical devices, the benefits they bring, the risks they bring. And now you are actually shaping safety and leadership policy and initiatives. So I would love to have you share your thoughts about what were some of your key takeaways.
Well, thanks, Naveen, for having me on this podcast today. It's really an honor to join you and everyone else. You know, I just want to say before I comment on what you asked me, I just wanted to congratulate Bijan. I'm really in awe of what's being created here. This is my second time at this conference, and like everyone said, it's been incredibly well received, but also it's really energizing. And I think you used the same word, Bijan. I returned with my cup is full, and I would encourage people to attend next year, absolutely, and honestly every year. It's there's been an unmet need, and I think this really fills it. It creates connection, that stimulates discussion about common themes that then take root. Bijan, you mentioned the risk management maturity model. I think that's just one example, but it really is an excellent venue. So there was a lot to take in. Right prior to the show, a couple of us were talking about how really rich and stimulating that the agenda was, a lot to take in. And I think one of the things that stuck out for me right from the start was that sometimes you think you're on an island. You wonder if anybody else is thinking what you're thinking, if anybody else gets it. And this is one of those places, it's probably the only place that we are able to speak to one another in the language that we understand, that stimulates conversation, that stimulates new thoughts. And to me, I think that was one of the most standout things. From a medical safety or from a patient safety perspective, I have to say that the other thing that struck me, and I think is incredibly real and very, very pertinent to risk management now more than ever, is that the patient is the most important central stakeholder in everything that we do. And I think we often say that. I think we often make statements that sound something like that. But really what struck me was that whether one had a clinical background or an engineering background or a regulatory background, everybody brought to bear the same sentiment throughout this entire conference. And in fact, the conference itself was organized in such a way that the patient message and the patient considerations came through constantly. But everyone organically brought this up all the time. And so that to me was maybe not, I shouldn't say surprising, because it actually wasn't surprising. I know the people in the space really feel that way. But it was incredibly reassuring because it made me realize that as advanced as some of the techniques are that we speak about, as difficult as some of the challenges are that we speak about, like cybersecurity and AI, having that patient-centric perspective is really critical. And I think from a leadership standpoint, I think that is something that needs to be fostered in our individual institutions, just across MedTech in general, but certainly now in the context of risk management more than ever.
I appreciate that, Olaf. Michelle, now you have lived and breathed regulatory world for a long time. You know so many changes happening. What are your reflections from the conference from that perspective? Was there any new learning that you came across?
Yep. So I just want to reconfirm what other people are saying here is that this was a very collaborative. It was about community more than even the content. Like I got to meet Steve. He is a
Mhm.
great guy. We ended up talking for like 3 hours straight. And
Mhm.
so it was like, yeah, it was community, not just content that made the
Mhm.
conference great for me. But as far as from a regulatory and quality perspective, there are so many things from Michelle Tarver's keynote that just really hit home with me. And it's stuff that I've been kind of indirectly following because it's a little ephemeral, like the case quality and the voluntary improvement program. And those programs are 15 years old. And
Mhm.
so industry is constantly surprised when FDA puts out something quote unquote new, but they've been telling you for 15 and 20 years that this is what we're thinking about and this
Mhm.
is where we're trying to go. And it just kind of reiterated some thoughts I had about how industry like disregards the FDA until they actually do something. And
Mhm.
then the FDA is surprised because they're like, why is industry so unprepared for, say, QMSR? We've been talking about it for
Mhm.
since the conception of the original QSR. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as Bijan and Olaf, you have already mentioned, this conference also provides a forum for conversations. And the hope is that through these conversations, we spread the word, we get people excited, we understand what the challenges and opportunities are. So, Aaron, how about you? From a technical point of view, you have done design control and risk management for so many years. What are your reflections?
So first, I really enjoyed the conference, and this was my first time. I'll definitely be attending next year and beyond. And the interesting thing for me was hearing from so many experienced experts with different backgrounds. And you get a lot of insights from people who, yes, we're all focused on risk management, but people with very different backgrounds, clinicians, regulatory experts, and just a variety of products, different types of medical devices. So for me, I learned something from every single presentation and almost from every discussion I had with other attendees. The other thing I
Mhm.
liked about the conference, and I think that's what Michelle and Olaf were alluding to, was just the feeling that you can have interesting conversations with all the people you meet. One attendee told me over lunch, she said, it's great to be able to talk with other risk nerds. And
Mhm.
it's true. Like we have different backgrounds and so different views and experiences, but all focused on improving risk management. And that's a powerful thing. And it's also during the 3 days, it's a time to get away from the day-to-day bustle of we got to
Yeah.
complete this document or this thing and really think about risk management in the greater sense
Yeah.
as you were commenting, like patient first safety, moving beyond just compliance and focusing on effectiveness of risk management in your company.
Yeah. Great. Great. Guys, I'm so excited to see all of you. So many of you have joined. I welcome all of you. And as you are settling down, please know that this is just a very casual conversation. I see some of you were at the conference. So make sure you are sharing your reflections and key takeaways in the chat. And I'll bring those comments to the extent possible. And those of you who did not attend, guys, here's an opportunity for you to ask a question to our panelists. They are world-known experts. Ask a question, regulatory question, design control question, or risk question, safety question. Put that in the chat and we will find time to address that. Okay, let's continue our conversation. So Olaf, I'm going to come back to you again. We do talk about patient safety all the time, right? Was there any message or a presentation that sort of highlighted that even beyond what we talk normally? And did you feel like that message was something that we should talk about more? Was there anything new? Help us a little bit more in terms of what kind of messaging we are hearing in our community about patient safety and how it relates to risk management.
Yeah, thanks, Naveen. Well, first I'll say that if I were to pull together a theme about what you just said, is that risk management in the med device context is not just a compliance exercise. It's a human practice, and at its core, that requires all the things we've talked about. It requires a shared commitment to patient. It requires collaboration. And the two things that really struck me in this regard, number one, were or things that were new. I think were newly discussed in a forum like this. Was really the patient perspective of risk. I mean, I think I said before, patient centricity is important, and I think we all hold that to be true. But what does that really mean, and how do you actually make sure that that shows up in what we're doing? So we had some really great conversations about that. We also had a really excellent keynote speaker who was able to introduce a very unique perspective. And for me, actually, that was the pivotal point of the conference. I think everything before that point had led up to excitement around hearing from patients. Everything after that point confirmed that hearing from patients directly is really key. Because the way that risks are perceived and sometimes codified in our risk documents in terms of benefit and risk and health risk assessments and so forth, sometimes can really leave out significant elements of risks that may not be obvious unless you've lived the experience. And I think getting additional insight into those is really important.
So can you give us a flavor of what you heard in that presentation?
Yeah, one of the things that I think we oftentimes resort to when we're thinking about harms or risks when things go wrong, but they're not catastrophically wrong, is a procedure prolongation, for example, right? And there are different grades of procedure prolongation. You can think of it as something that can prolong the procedure to such an extent that harm is actually induced. Other times, maybe the procedure prolongation isn't that significant. And other times, maybe you have to stop the procedure or not even start it at all. And it's easy to walk away from that and say, well, we didn't have a procedure, we'll just reschedule, or maybe we'll just do it another day, or maybe we'll just wait for a while and then try again. There's no really easy way to collect information around what patients feel about this, but I think hearing from patients directly, and what we heard in that presentation was that there is a lot of risk and harm and psychological distress that goes with procedures that are delayed or stopped or postponed. There's also some medical risk sometimes. And I think that this is just more for us to think about. And we still have to translate that into some sort of an actionable risk-benefit analysis. But ultimately, I think that to me was a bit of a call to action. Maybe tools have to evolve. Maybe thinking has to evolve. I have much more to say about thinking and judgment. Yeah. That was another theme. But I think that was one of the things that really stuck out to me, that people are thinking about this, and it's not an isolated thought.
And just to clarify, by procedure, you mean the actual clinical procedure in which the device is being used. It's not like the quality procedures we have in our system. Okay.
Correct.
Just to
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good clarification. Yeah.
Okay. Michelle, I'm going to lean on you now. Now, obviously, I heard there was a lot of discussion about AI. It's on everyone's mind. We did have a brief conversation, I think, brief question in Dr. Tarver's presentation. What are you hearing, or what did you hear in terms of conversation around regulatory oversight as far as AI in medical device is concerned? If you can share some thoughts.
Because I spent so much time with Steve talking about the QMSR stuff, I really didn't dive into the AI aspects. I took my time during a lot of those sessions to build the relationship and learn more specifically about the QMSR and the history of the FDA around that.
Okay. Let's then share something about QMSR. Of course, AI is just a technology that will be applied, right. But were there any new perspectives that you gathered or gained in talking to people about QMSR?
Well, yes, because what QMSR does, it moves past just risk management into risk-based. So now you have risk-based decision-making and procedures and processes, and then you have risk management in the context of 14971. So when we have this risk conference and all these discussions, it needs to be bigger than just the product risk that can be assessed through tools like 14971 describes into that bigger context. So risk management is just one element of a risk-based thought and process approach.
Yeah. And this conference brought together many different ideas, as we are hearing. So Aaron, how about you? Again, I'm going to ask you from a little bit more technical point of view. Were there any presentations or conversations that stood out to you from a design control point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few, but one I should point out that the speaker who followed me, Puchita Gurabatini, if I'm pronouncing her name properly, this was the first time I've presented at a conference where the next speaker finished my presentation, and so which was wonderful. So I was talking about adapting risk management methods to deal with fast changing software, but glossed over the details, and she went into the details of risk management with Agile software development, which is what I see. I mean, I see challenges there with all my clients these days. But there was a presentation from Horizon Surgical Systems. He was talking about fail-safe design for surgical robotics. And this was a fascinating presentation for multiple reasons. So I've worked on lots of medical robotics projects, and they present special challenges for risk management. product teams learn that the hard way if they underestimate the challenges. But what Horizon Surgical Systems has developed is bumping up the challenge even more. So they've developed a surgical robotic system for cataract surgery, but it's an autonomous system. And so it's eye surgery with really tight margins, very little margin for error, and autonomous. And what he talked about was how they, from the very beginning of development, their safety architecture and their safety strategy, and also the idea that a safe state for the robotic system. So you can imagine this is an autonomous system. If it runs into trouble, it needs to hand it off to the eye surgeon. But what he pointed out is that how you do that is very important from a safety standpoint. So they had a context-dependent safe states. And so, and there were multiple other details in his presentation. But really fascinating.
So you have piqued my interest now. Context-dependent safety architecture. We're going to do a whole show on this, Aaron, later on. It is giving me a lot of ideas, a lot of new insights. Guys, we have a lot questions, comments coming in. And there's one from Kerry I want to read out. One of the most valuable takeaways from the conference was, without a doubt, the networking and connections. We have talked about that. Beyond the sessions and content, the ripest fruit for me was the realization that the perspectives we each bring about risk and safety aren't isolated. They are shared, validated, and even strengthened by others in the field. There is something incredibly powerful about hearing your own thoughts reflected back by peers and leaders and seeing them not only acknowledged, but endorsed. That is great, right? Because it helps us to see what other peoples are also experiencing. Maybe they share our pain. Maybe they share our perspectives, and we can share our best practices as well with that. So let's continue our conversation. Olaf, I'm going to come back to you once again and pick on this theme of intersection between the patient perspective and how we practice risk management. If there is a presentation that you can pick out that stood out to you, or a conversation on the sidelines that stood out to you, that made you think about it a little bit on your way home, please share that with us.
Yeah, there were so many. I think if there was one that I would hone in on, it would be one that I wish we would have the whole day to talk about. And that was the one with Steve Gompertz and John Blom, who talked about hidden influences, so risk management can go wrong. And I have to admit, when I saw the title, I thought, oh, this could be interesting. But when they really got into it, what they started to uncover was not just the collaboration aspect of risk management, but also the judgment aspect and the psychological aspects that we sometimes don't recognize or take for granted that are behind decision-making and behind mature risk decision-making. That also requires community. That also requires collaboration. Silos limit that sort of thing. And I think that is a fruitful ground for us to think about, because there is a lot that we need to uncover there. And just from a leadership perspective, as I was flying home later on that week, I kept coming back to that talk because I thought to myself, boy, there's a lot to bring back to the organization. But now I've been thinking myself, how do we develop greater levels of comfort, psychological safety around talking about risk? How do we develop greater levels of critical thinking? How do we develop more awareness around biases that we might bring to the table? And none of that happens overnight. None of it happens with the wave of a wand. It happens when we have conversations and we start to think about examples and we have deeper discussions. So I think that to me was really an eye-opening discussion, but also I think a bit of a call to action. Because I think, as Michelle was saying before, with QMSR, decision-making, maturity, and judgment is going to be really critical. And so this is not necessarily meant to be reactive to regulation, but I think it's really what will get us to the next phase, especially as we think about AI and cybersecurity and so forth. So there was one comment in the chat that I wanted to just briefly talk to. Maybe I can wait until the end. But Elif Girel asked, could you tell us if there was any feedback from students who attended a career day? And I'll let you comment on that later, Naveen, but I'll say that some of the students that I spoke with opened my eyes too, because the message that came through very clearly is that there is a hunger to understand patient perspective and a real danger that if we don't bring that in early into engineering curriculums, for example, and vice versa, that we really might miss this patient-centric approach. So I think it's great that we're having the conversation, but it needs to start way earlier.
We will actually visit that comment in just a little bit in the program today. There's a great comment. We will discuss more. So Michelle, I was going to ask you, from a regulatory perspective, of course, QMSR is going to look at the logic and the thought process behind decisions to assess if they were risk-based or not. What I'm also hearing from Olaf is that this is something that we have to learn a little bit more. Judgment requires comfort with some ambiguity and uncertainty, and it's not clear black and white. Help us kind of process through this a little bit, Michelle. And I'm going a little bit into opinions and perspective here, not necessarily the conference, but it's a very relevant topic right now to talk about. When QMSR says that risk-based decision making, what would regulators be looking for to assess whether those decisions were made correctly or not?
Yep. So they're really looking for, is your quality management system living, and does every system interlink with each other? And risk is the core. They have this graphic in the new inspection model,
Mhm.
almost looks like a tire where the patient is the very center of the hubcap. And then you expand outwards to all of the quality management systems and subsystems that those involve. So the FDA is like really focused on um, the breakdown between the systems. So
Yeah.
say if they find several things in several different places that are broken or did not feed the next step in the quality management system, they can take the sum total of those problems, and then that's when you get written up for a problem with your risk-based thinking and your culture of quality. And we've already seen in just the 483s have become publicly available since February, the lack of risk-based quality
Yeah.
management system decision.
Yeah. Michelle, I think you mentioned a very key point I want to emphasize once again. It's the connection between different subsystems of the quality system where the problems will appear. And the investigators or auditors will notice those symptoms, and that is what will lead them to question the entire approach to risk-based decision making. Did I hear that correctly, or am I kind of overreacting to this?
Yep, no, that is you nailed it, and I think it's going to take industry totally off guard where the FDA is going to go beyond just a 43 for your CAPA system and a 43 for your supplier controls. It's kind of like a finding against management with executive responsibility. So not only is it that now, but it's also that your culture of quality is broken and is therefore not
Mhm.
truly patient centered.
So I think we should all pay attention to what Dr. Tarver was talking about in her presentation, reminding us of that culture for quality. So I'm going to stick to this point a little bit more. And Aaron and Bijan, I'm going to invite both of you to share your thoughts. It seems like a systems engineering problem to me from a quality systems point of view. What do you think about that? Like, there are subsystems in the quality system that need to work together. There are interfaces and connections, and eventually our goal is to produce or sustain and support safe and effective products using risk-based thinking. How does this idea sound to you, and can you share some thoughts on it? Aaron, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I guess I would say finally. So something I've been encouraging my clients for years to do more of, which is connect the different parts of the operations. I work primarily with new product development, but of course become aware of all the issues of post-market activities, and that's most of the life of the product. And one of the issues I see over and over again is that product issues are identified through post-market processes, but they're not fed back effectively into, let's say, software updates for the product.
Yeah. So there's a broken connection there. Bijan, how about you? You have practiced systems engineering for many, many years. From a design and engineering point of view, what are your thoughts about thinking about the quality management system from that perspective?
Yeah, of course, systems engineering is a discipline that can be applied to many aspects of life, and also it includes quality management systems. There's relationships, there's connections and linkages that need to be maintained. And I think risk management is what I usually profess as it is a bridge of communication. It's a connection between multiple aspects of product development systems, which includes the QMS, engineering, clinical, regulatory, all kinds of areas. So,
So we have to think about this as not just like sum of moving parts, but more than that. So Olaf, in that context, let's touch on this because you brought up the judgment question, right? Very, very important. We have to make a risk-based decision, but there's a judgment involved. And I'm just wondering, thinking out loud here, is that if the connectivity between systems are missing, is the information really flowing up to us in a reasonably good way that our judgment is well informed? And if not, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I think that's critical. There are so many biases that come to bear that ultimately might work their way into whether judgment is good or bad, more likely bad. Things like recency bias or confirmation bias, all the things that we learn about and hear about. But more than that, I think if I'm reflecting on organizational culture, it's one of silos. Silos really limit maturity. And I think we've all said what we've learned this week is that how much we can learn from each other when we have touch points, and when we intentionally create touch points amongst ourselves between disciplines that allow us to work through this ambiguity together and develop some guardrails and frameworks around thinking about these things. That can really clarify complexity, but also mature judgment, all the while still centered on the patient. And I think organizations that seek out patient input, be it directly or indirectly, I think will be able to mature their judgments as well. So I think more to think about there, honestly. The leadership matters in this sense. I think it sets the tone, it inspires better questions, it challenges, good judgment. But judgment is going to be really critical. And I think that's, always has been. But even more so. And I think this is what really crystallized for me throughout all the conversations.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking, Olaf, here is that the judgment cannot be proceduralized. Like for a long time, we have relied on procedures, and they're important. We must have them. But I think we are moving into a world where we have to learn to live with uncertainty and ambiguity, and judgment will be involved. So how do we build this muscle, the judgment muscle? And did the conference provide you some perspective in terms of moving in that direction?
Yeah, you're right. You can't proceduralize it, right? You can only proceduralize so much. I mean, I think you can proceduralize things in a way that stimulates or actively require good judgment. And by that, I mean actively making sure that there are requirements in your procedure that stop, ask questions, confirm, etc. But yeah, it goes to maturity. It goes to maturity of a model. I think thinking back to first principles around this, really breaking it down and making sure that we can speak a common language about that is important, because as we share our expertise and funnel those into conversations around what credible safety and effectiveness reasoning looks like, having that shared common understanding of what the basis is really, really important. If we don't have that common understanding, and if we don't have the touch points between disciplines, and we don't construct our interactions around the procedures in such a way that we interact with each other and maybe have time for deliberation and challenge ourselves, I think judgment won't come. But judgment can definitely come. It's a muscle we can exercise. It's not a binary. It's not there or not there. It isn't there or not there. There are the grades of this, and I think we need to recognize it. I think as leaders we need to reward it, and that's a whole different conversation. And I think more than just the technical prowess that we have and that we need to continue to develop. Also, this is the second most important thing, I think.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So this theme is emerging, right? That we have to learn to live in this new world where technology is evolving. And I want to come back now a little bit more, Aaron, asking you this perspective from a technology point of view. You mentioned this autonomous surgical procedure or device that is being developed. Anything else that caught your eye from an advanced technology point of view that our audience should know about and maybe think about differently from a risk management point of view?
Yeah, but before I comment on that, I just wanted to reiterate what Olaf said about judgment and the importance of clarity and judgment, because there was a excellent presentation about this, and I think the title of it was, he said, Beyond the Numbers. That's what it was. And it was integrating critical thinking into medical device risk management. And it really resonated with me because as engineers, it's very easy for us to just focus on numbers and argue about, is this a probability level 4 or probability level 3? He made the case for why it's important to be very clear about the most important part about risk management, which is the safety argument for a completed device. It is safe because of this. And he gave some examples of benefit risk analysis, and I had to cringe because I realized, like, I've seen that in a number of risk management reports. And we tend to put too much effort into the numerical part of risk management and not enough into the crucial conclusions and the judgment.
Man,
and the
I 100% second that. That is you that statement you just nailed where a big breakdown is in industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then
Awesome.
on the technical side, things are getting more challenging. There was a very good discussion on Friday, and we're talking about how to keep up with connected medical devices. And very often we have solutions that are multiple products from one manufacturer, or even more challenging, from multiple manufacturers. And it's as if there's another level of risk.
Yeah, for sure. So listen, AI is the big elephant in the room, right? So I would be negligent if I didn't bring this up again and just invited you guys to share your thoughts, whether it's from the conference or just in general. What are your perspectives about how AI is being used in medical devices, design, engineering, patient safety, regulatory, whatever your focus is? Please share your thoughts. I'm going to start with you again, Olaf. Please let us know what you are thinking about AI.
It's not an easy question. And I think we don't know what we don't know. There are a lot of unknowns around AI. And I think wherever you put the pin in this ecosystem, whether it be somewhere along the line of the product lifecycle or in risk decision making or in regulatory considerations, there is just a lot that we still need to internalize and learn about AI and how we maybe evolve our thinking around risk when it comes to AI. It's encouraging that there are some really bright minds who are pushing that envelope. I would say, just to go back to our previous comments about judgment, I know that AI isn't the same as judgment, but I think AI can be used to develop better rationales, develop better judgments. Your risk coach is an excellent example of this, where you can challenge scenarios, you can think about things, you can train yourself to really ask the next question. And to me, that's a very unique and interesting value proposition right now, because using AI in a way that doesn't give you an answer, but helps you think through an issue, maybe gives you a different sort of counterpoint to consider. To me, that's where it starts. When it comes to the risk of AI, there we also have to have common mindsets, common frameworks around what's good practice, transparency, ethics, patient engagement, patient centricity. There are some work streams that are evolving around this too in this community. So I look forward to learning more myself about this and thinking more about it. But I think there are many ways in which we can use AI.
Yeah, for sure. Michelle, how about you from a regulatory side? We did hear that FDA is using an AI platform for submissions. We don't know what's going on there, but what is your perspective on how AI is driving just the whole world of regulatory, whether it's submission or post-market or even the field of regulatory science itself? What is it that we should pay attention to?
Well, I see in both my clients and from different people in warning letters from the FDA is the over-reliance on AI to do things you don't know how to do, which is fine, but there was no human behind the way they were using the AI. For instance, there was this company that didn't really understand good manufacturing practices. And this was a pharmaceutical company. And they just had AI write out all of their GMPs, and it was all wrong. And it got escalated to a warning letter because nobody knew how to fix it, because nobody knew what GMPs were in the first place. So FDA is expecting to see that there is a human behind the AI that is validating that the AI is correct and accurate and is not hallucinating. And I've also seen people trying to think that they can use AI to replace experts and consultants, to the point that I had one client who used ChatGPT to write the instructions for use for his product. And not only were the instructions not entirely accurate, but that AI had hallucinated a whole glossary of symbols that don't exist in any type of harmonized standard. And the client just got all up in arms trying and like, well, that can't be the standard because ChatGPT would know it if it was.
Yes. So I think your watch out about over reliance and not using critical thinking is so on the mark. Erin, how about you? Share your thoughts on how it is changing, or what your perspective is from a technical side, how AI is changing our world.
Yeah. So I think it's a fascinating topic. Michelle's point is excellent, that AI needs to be a tool, but it doesn't replace experience and expertise. It amplifies it. There's a big role for AI tools. Of just from what I've heard from multiple software companies, these new specialized AI tools to assist with risk management, I think are going to have a huge effect. This is not ChatGPT. This is specialized AI tools that understand medical devices and regulations and your quality system and your products. So they can serve both as a expert assistant to product teams, but they can also accumulate knowledge about risks associated with your products. And so one of the biggest problems I see as a consultant is that product teams start from zero. And they shouldn't. There's a whole lot known about hazards and risks associated with that category of product. And I think AI tools will be a means to help them start off with that knowledge. It's not ChatGPT that's going to do that.
Yeah. So I'm hearing actually a very good message from both of you, Erin and Michelle, that, hey, the technology is strong, but it depends upon how we deploy it. and it can give us garbage if we are not careful and don't use our critical thinking. Guys, we are running very close to the end time. So I'm going to bring this point again. And Bijan, I'm going to ask you to share thoughts on this. Any feedback from students who attended the career day on the last day of conference? First of all, this is unusual to consider a career day in a conference like this. What prompted you and what did you hear from them?
My philosophy about this conference, because as I've said, this is by the community, for the community, is to give as much value as possible to the participants. And as I'm an academic now myself, I wanted to bring the conference to the world of academia. That's one of the reasons we hosted it at Northeastern University. And there are a lot of students there, both in Northeastern University and other nearby universities like MIT and Boston University and so on, that are looking for jobs. And so I thought, well, while we are in a university, we have a lot of sponsors who are also employers. The sponsors had asked me, can we talk to your talent pool? And I thought, well, the sponsors want to talk to them. The students want jobs. Why don't we put them together? I thought this is another avenue to deliver value to the conference. And so we created the afternoon of the last day as a career day. I made it free so students could come for no cost. A lot of people signed up and they came, and I did get feedback, but mostly the feedback I got was from the students that volunteered to work at the conference. And they were very energized. I'm going to read back one of the comments. It says, as a student, I gained valuable insight into how risk management, communication, and collaboration contribute to safer healthcare outcomes and professional success. So we had just a lot of positive feedback from the students. And one thing that was interesting was that some of the students are a little shy about talking to experienced and people. They were a little nervous about coming forward. And one of the things that really was heartwarming to me was to see some of our more experienced people going to the students and talking to them and bringing them into the conversation. And that was such a delightful thing to see.
Yeah. Well, this is music to my heart because I'm all about conversations about risk. So guys, what a fascinating conversation we have had. I'm going to give you guys a couple of moments to just think about one key takeaway you want to share with our audience today. And in the meantime, I'll share just one quick announcement with everybody. Guys, I want to tell you about this risk coach that I have recently launched. It is based on AI, and it's not to replace your expertise, but actually help you become better at making risk-based judgments and decisions. Because many of us know that that's what we are supposed to do. It's not like check the box. And we have to apply critical thinking, especially in situations which are complex and data is rare, which is our world, right? So that is the purpose of the LTR risk coach. It is AI powered, and I call it a thinking partner. It's not going to give you a procedure or a template by design. It's not going to give you a yes or no answer. It does not replace your expertise. It's designed to organize thinking and challenge your assumptions and create options for decision making. So thinking partner. And it is trained exclusively on my 10 years of experience and knowledge and the risk philosophy that I have practiced in my experience. It's right now available on a limited basis to people. So if you're interested, reach out to me and I'll share that information with you. With that, guys, let's share one key takeaway that you came back with from this conference and you are willing to share with our audience. Olaf, I'm going to start with you. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Naveen. It's been a real pleasure being here today. Many takeaways. The biggest one for me is connect, don't make assumptions about what you know and what other people know. Combine your knowledge and have conversations. I think that way we learn. And I think that way we see that we actually are not very different in our perceptions of risk sometimes. It's just the lens that we're looking through. And it'll take those silos to be broken down to get more mature in what we do.
Wonderful. Michelle, how about you? One key takeaway.
Just the communication across, like to get all the stakeholders, including the thoughts of the FDA's perspective on that, so that you're looking at risk from the patient side, which obviously is directly interfaces with the device, but then the context that all of that operates within is that you really have to be thinking beyond just the product life cycle, but the life cycle of all the processes that interface with the product to make it safe and effective.
Wonderful. Aaron, how about you?
Don't assume you know everything about risk management, no matter how old you are. And There's a lot to learn from people with different backgrounds and different insights. And then also don't assume because you passed the last few audits that your risk management at your company can't be improved. It's really about effectiveness.
Wonderful. Bijan, I'm going to give you the last word, but before I do that, I once again want to congratulate you and thank you for being a leader in this space. You are not only bringing us together, but you're also inspiring the next generation of practitioners like you did by inviting these students to the conference. You are creating something that doesn't exist, has not existed before. So I really congratulate you and say I'm very grateful to you for doing this. So please share your closing remarks and maybe a sneak peek of what you're thinking. I know you are tired, but I'm sure you are tired next year. So please give us your thoughts.
Yeah. Actually, I'll give you a couple of thoughts. One of them, Aaron said something. He said that this is the first time he's been in a conference where somebody continued his thoughts in his presentation. That was not accidental. There's a lot of thought that goes into the programming and the curation of the speeches. So there's a thread that happens. So I'm glad you enjoyed that. Second thing is about next year's conference. Actually, I'm right now in Europe. I'm visiting a number of sites, trying to identify one for next year. I invite all of you to come back and also additional people that have not come yet. If you want to be notified when we know where the conference will be and being notified of when it's possible to register, send me an email so I can put you on our notification list and we'll come back to you. And I hope to see you in Europe in 2027. It's going to be in June in 2027, about a year from now.
Wonderful. Can't wait for that, Bijan. And before I close, I also want to do a call to action to everybody. Guys, as Bijan said, this is a conference run by volunteers. This is not something that a professional agency does. Raise your hand if you want to help out. Volunteers are needed. If you want to sponsor, this conference takes money and resources. Please start making a business case internally to support this initiative. This is for us. And if we don't sustain it, we will not be able to have it next year. So there's a call to action to all of us. Guys, what a wonderful time I've had. I've enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Thank you everyone for showing up and staying with us for 1 full hour. We usually do it for only 30 minutes, but this was a special session. Thank you to everybody on my panel. Guys, you are great and you are the ones who are driving this forward. And I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Naveen.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thanks, Naveen, for organizing this.